Hi, and welcome to Robin's Nest Readers. We're going to start off 2020 with a whole different series of books. Today, we're going to read about Hansel and Gretel. It was written by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, pictures by William Dugan. Near a great forest, there lived a poor woodcutter and his wife and his 2 children. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's Gretel. They had very little to bite or to sup, and once, when there was much want in the land, the man could not even earn the daily bread. When he thought of this, he sighed heavily and said to his wife, who was the children's stepmother, "What will become of us? We could not even feed our children, let alone ourselves." "I will tell you what," answered the wife. "We will take the children early in the morning into the forest where it is thickest. There we will leave them. They will never find their way home again." The husband protested, but his wife left him no peace until he consented. The 2 children, sleepless with hunger, heard their stepmother's plan. "It's all over with us," wept Gretel. "Hush, Gretel," said Hansel. "I will manage something." When the parents had gone to sleep, Hansel slipped out. He filled his pockets with white pebbles. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Go to sleep quietly," cried Gretel. "All will be well." The next morning they set off all together on their way to the forest. When they had gone a little way, Hansel stood still and looked back toward the house, and this he did again and again, till his father said to him, "Hansel, what are you looking at? Take care not to forget your legs." "Oh, father," said Hansel, "I am looking at my little white kitten who is sitting up on the roof to bid me goodbye." "You foolish boy," said the woman, "that is not your kitten, but the sunshine on the chimney pot." Of course, Hansel had not been looking at his kitten, but had been taking every now and then a pebble from his pocket and dropping it on the road. When they reached the middle of the forest, the father and stepmother left the children and went off to their work. The children waited all day, but the parents did not return. Gretel was frightened, but when the moon came up, it shone on the pebbles that Hansel had dropped, and the children found their way home. The father was glad, for it had gone to his heart to leave them in the woods alone. Not long afterwards, there was again great hunger in the land, and the children heard their stepmother talk to their father as before. During the night, Hansel got up to gather some pebbles, but the door was locked, and he couldn't get out. Early the next morning, the stepmother awoke the children and gave them each a piece of bread to eat when they were in the woods. Hansel crumbled his piece and dropped the crumbs behind him along the path. The parents went off as before, leaving the children. When night came, they did not return. When the moon came up, Hansel looked for the breadcrumbs so that they could find their way home. But alas, the woodland birds had hungrily eaten every single crumb, and the children could not find their way. At last they lay down at the foot of a tree, Gretel crying and Hansel trying to comfort her. The next morning, the children set off again to find their father's house. They tried for hours, but they only found themselves farther in the wood, and if help had not soon come, they would have starved. About noon, they saw a pretty snow-white bird sitting on a bough and singing so sweetly that they had stopped to listen. And when he had finished, the bird spread his wings and flew before them, and they followed after him until they came to a little house. The bird perched on the roof, and when they came nearer, they saw that the house was built of gingerbread and roofed with cakes. The windows were of transparent sugar. "We will have some of this," said Hansel, "and make a fine meal. I will eat a piece of the roof, Gretel, and you can have some of the window. That will taste so sweet." So Hansel reached up and broke off a bit of the roof just to see how it tasted, and Gretel stood by the window and gnawed at it. Then they heard a thin voice call out from inside, "Nibble, nibble like a mouse, who is nibbling at my house?" And the children answered, "Oh, don't you grouse, it's just a mouse." They went on eating, never disturbing themselves. Hansel found that the roof tasted very nice and took down a great piece of it. Gretel pulled out a large round window pane and sat down to eat it. Then the door opened, and an aged woman came out, leaning upon a stick. Hansel and Gretel felt very frightened and let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Ah, my dear children, how come you here? You must come indoors and stay with me. You will be no trouble." She took each by the hand and led them into her little house, and there they found a good meal laid out, of milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. After that she showed them 2 little beds, and Hansel and Gretel laid themselves down on them and thought they were in heaven. Now it so happened that the old woman, though her behavior was so kind, was a wicked witch who lay in wait for children and had built the little house on purpose to entice them. When they were once inside, she would cook them, and then it was a feast day with her. Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she got up to look at them, and as they lay sleeping so peacefully with round rosy cheeks, she said to herself, "What a fine feast I shall have." She grasped Hansel and led him into a little stable and shut him up in a hanging cage, and yell as he might, it was no good. Then she went back to Gretel and shook her, crying, "Get up, lazy bones, fetch water and cook something nice for your brother. He is outside in the stable and must be fattened up, and when he's fat enough, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was of no use. She had to do what the wicked witch bade her. Each morning the old woman visited the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out your finger, that I may tell if you soon will be fat enough." Hansel, however, held out a little bone, and the old woman, who had weak eyes, thought it was Hansel's finger. She wondered very much that it was not getting fatter. When 4 weeks had passed and Hansel seemed to remain so thin, she lost patience and could wait no longer. "Now then, Gretel," cried she to the little girl, "be quick and draw water. Be Hansel fat or be he thin, today I will cook him." Oh, what a grief for the poor little sister, and how the tears flowed down her cheeks. "Spare me your tears," said the old woman. "They are of no use. The oven is already heated. Creep in and see if it is hot enough for baking." She pushed poor Gretel toward the oven. Gretel, once in, she meant to shut the door upon her and let her be baked, and then she would have eaten her too. But Gretel guessed her intentions and said, "I don't know how to do it. How shall I get in?" "Stupid goose," said the old woman. "The opening is big enough, do you see? I could get in myself." And she stooped down and put her head in the oven's mouth. Then the flames reached out. There was a terrible bang, and the witch was swept up the chimney, never to be seen again. At least I don't think she was. "Hansel, we're free," cried Gretel happily. "The old witch has gone forever." Gretel found the key to Hansel's cage, and he flew out as soon as the door was opened. How rejoiced they both were, how they hugged each other, and danced about and kissed each other, and as they had nothing more to fear, they went over all the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests of pearls and precious stones. "This is something better than pebbles," said Hansel, as he filled his pockets. And Gretel, thinking she also would like to carry something home with her, filled her apron full. "Now away we go," said Hansel, "if we only can get out of the witch's wood and find our way home." When they had journeyed a few hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We can never get across this," said Hansel. "I see no stepping stones and no bridge." "And there's no boat either," said Gretel. "But here comes a huge white duck. If I ask her, she will help us over." So she cried, "Duck, duck, here we stand, Hansel and Gretel on the land. Stepping stones and bridge we lack. Carry us over on your nice white back." The duck came willingly, and Hansel got upon her and told his sister to come too. "No," answered Gretel, That would be too hard upon the duck. We can go separately, one after the other." And that was how it was managed, and after that they went on happily until they came to the wood, and the way grew more and more familiar, till at last they saw their father's house. Then they ran till they came up to it, rushed in at the door, and fell on their father's neck. The man had not had a quiet hour since he left his children in the wood. Now his wicked wife was dead, and the children were back, and when Gretel opened her apron, precious stones were scattered all over the room, and Hansel took out one handful after another out of his pocket. What a fortune it was! Then was all care at an end, and they lived in great joy together. There you go, Hansel and Gretel. Love won at the end. Have a great day.